Syracuse football is just 3 days away. 3 days from Syracuse football. Let's take a look at the whole season. Let's take a look at the big picture. Let's take a look at what I'm looking at right now, Syracuse football wise, as we head in to game one of a fresh 2023 campaign where there are high expectations. Let's take a look. Let's break it all down on your Locked On Syracuse Wednesday episode.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome into your Locked On Syracuse Wednesday episode. It's your boy OV saying, thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today and every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. That's your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. We're 3 games away. Or not 3 games away, 3 days away from game day. There we go. Get that one out right. It's exciting. I'm fired up, and I want to lead every episode with that, sort of leading into our game day on Saturday. There's 2 more episodes this week where we'll preview a little bit more of the specifics of this game against Colgate, obviously concluding the week on Friday with some keys, some predictions, some questions that I think need to be answered in week 1, and some of the other key components that I'm looking for. So today we wrap up, I guess, sort of our preseason coverage. This is the conclusion of our look at this team, not in a game-specific manner. So today we're sort of looking macro, and then tomorrow on our Thursday episode and Friday for our final episode and our preview, our official preview of the Syracuse-Colgate matchup, we'll look a little bit more at the micro and the specifics of week 1. And just as a little lay of the land, I'm excited for how this year is going to go, right? Where we're planning some things out. Monday will be sort of a recap episode, things that stood out to me. Tuesday, more of a deep dive, some of the stuff that maybe a second viewing of the highlights, the film, the intricacies of that game can get you. Then Wednesday, you start that turnover, right? What's next? Where are the questions? Thursday gets you into some specifics. Friday gets you that preview. That's sort of the rhythm that I expect to be in this year. Just a little bit of the X's and O's as we head into a really important season, a really exciting season for Syracuse football. If you got other ideas, things that you would prefer to happen in terms of layout-wise for the weeks, especially in football season, that Tuesday episode and that Wednesday episode leaves a little bit of room for, if basketball's got some big news and some recruiting updates there, or even in-season recruiting updates for Syracuse football. But the general idea would be a pure recap on Monday, a little bit more of a deep dive Tuesday, a sort of where do things stand on Wednesday, and then Thursday and Friday, a broader preview of the opponent. Friday be that true preview with predictions, keys, things like that. If you want to change it up, let me know. Fire it off in the comments on YouTube or over on Twitter or X at LO_Syracuse over there. And that's sort of where this idea came from today, as I fired off a tweet. And I apologize, this is coming in the afternoon today for our episode, but I sort of fired off, is there anything you want to hit on before Saturday? And one thing was brought up by Lucas Sachel over on Twitter, and he said, I feel more optimistic about the football team this year going in than I did last year at this time. And that sort of sparked what I wanted to talk about today. And I think that is a correct statement. And I say that not necessarily in terms of personnel. I think I was a little bit higher on the team as a whole last year, but the schedule last year made things a lot more difficult. And I was very, very worried about what that schedule entailed and how Syracuse would be able to handle it, with really, really strong opponents week in and week out in an absolute gauntlet, a little bit similar to this season. But it seems like the surrounding of the gauntlet this year is a lot more manageable. And I think that's where my increased confidence comes from this season in terms of record. I think this year's football team, I'm way more confident in their ability to put up a strong record than I was at this time last season. I think last season I predicted a 4-8 Syracuse football team. Glad to be wrong. And I want to establish that now, right? We're in our last preseason episode of the season. I want Syracuse to win every game they play. Every single one. I want them to win. So please make sure that we interpret my predictions with that grain of salt. I don't want Syracuse to lose X amount of games. I didn't want them to go 4-8 last season. I was ecstatic to see them go 6-0 and have a winning season and make it to a bowl game. This season, I believe the official prediction I gave was 7-5 a couple episodes ago. Maybe in the later portion of this episode, I'll take another look at that, give a final one, go game by game, and maybe make a full prediction in that regard. But I expect Syracuse to win more games this season, and that's where the sort of increased confidence type vibe comes from this time around. I think they win more games than I felt like they did last season. And a lot of that has to do with the schedule. The non-conference slate for Syracuse, very, very manageable. Colgate should be a very simple win. Western Michigan should be a very simple win. Purdue, a bit of a toss-up, right? I think Syracuse on paper should be better than Purdue, and that seems to be the narrative that a lot of people are running with. And at the same time, that's what the case is with Army, right? Syracuse should beat Army, I think, more so than Purdue. But, that one's a bit of a football game where you could be a little surprised in that one. I think that's a very, very manageable non-conference schedule. And that schedule sort of allowing you to build up and progressing nicely. I like how, Colgate is going to be your easiest game. Western Michigan then vamps it up a little bit into Purdue. So you get that nice sort of escalation to start the season. And then Army should be a little bit of a dip. We're almost on a roller coaster here. We're going up, 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 up. Army gives you that little dip, and now you got to go back up again. So it's just getting you that little speed boost. Army should serve as a nice almost recovery type week where it's not as difficult of a game as Purdue. And I'm not saying go into Army as if that's a cakewalk, because it's not. That is a program that can beat you. It is a team that could come in and beat you without question, right? If you take them for irrelevance, and if you don't take them seriously and you're not willing to do what you need to do, they can beat you. But that is an easier matchup than Purdue in all likelihood. And then that brings you into the ACC opener against Clemson in the Dome. It's a good start to the schedule. And, the next 2 weeks, you go Clemson is probably an almost peak. You dip a little bit for UNC, who's without Tez Walker still at this point, the latest I've heard of this, which is crazy to hear, there's no update and they're presumably playing without him at this point, just a couple of games away from their season opener against South Carolina. Although I will say, one more time, prayers to UNC and Chapel Hill and everyone over there right now. Football takes a backseat to that without question. And then as we go back, you get into Florida State. So that trio of games is tough. But the rest of the schedule, Virginia Tech could be tough, but I think Syracuse is in an okay spot to beat them. BC, they should win. Georgia Tech, they should win. Wake Forest, they should, in theory, win. Wake Forest, a bit of a toss-up game. Pittsburgh, in all likelihood, could be the number 4 team in this conference this season. Not in all likelihood, but has a chance to be. And don't get me started on that. I saw it on Twitter today as well. People, I try to block it out. I try to forget about it. That game at Yankee Stadium is absolutely idiotic from John Wildhack. Stupid. You play at Yankee Stadium every 2 years. Why are you sacrificing a home game to play at Pitt? But let's take a break. Let me breathe. Let me get calmed down. And then we'll continue to look at my big picture thoughts at this 2023 season for Syracuse to wrap up our preseason coverage of Syracuse football. It's game week. We're excited. We're fired up. Let's listen to some words from our friends over at Game Time. You ever been stressed out trying to buy tickets, maybe for a concert, a show, a game, whatever that might be? It can be stressful. It can be a pain. And if you're the one that buys the tickets, maybe for a larger group, it can also be nerve-wracking. And buying tickets to your favorite events, it shouldn't be stressful. Then Game Time can help you with that. It's a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater near you with killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee. You can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hype for the fun you'll have. It's game week, right? Get those tickets for Syracuse and Colgate this weekend. They've got some awesome things, flash deals, last-minute tickets, easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. They've got pictures of the seat view and that low price guarantee with event cancellation protection. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. A Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price in the same section and row for less. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms supply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guarantee. All right, Owen Valentine here on your Locked On Syracuse Wednesday episode. It's a Wednesday afternoon episode. I apologize. School is vamping back up. I had to go in this morning and was booked last night. So this was the earliest that I could jump on and record. Excuse me. But I think it's a fun little way to wrap up our preseason coverage today. Big picture stuff, some conclusions to preseason camp. Obviously, we got the two deep yesterday. If you missed that episode, feel free to check it out. Breaking down the two deep, what was a surprise? What are some things that you're sort of looking at this point in time? I mean, you've got an option right here and a really fun sort of situation for a guy in Donovan Brown, who we talked about yesterday, right? Probably gets a start in lieu of Trevor Pena's injury, or owie, as Dino Babers referred to it, and a really good opportunity for him. So a lot of eyes will be on him this week. But this is a team right now that I think presents experience in the areas that you want it to, at the quarterback, and a lot of key defensive spots with the likes of Marlo Wax, with the likes of Caleb Okechukwu, and some guys in the secondary as well. It's a team that, we were worried about, and I was as terrified as anybody in the Syracuse fan base, by a large margin, maybe even in some of your minds, right? There was a lot of turnover and a recruiting class in terms of true freshmen that didn't jump off the page by any means. I'm glad I took a step back, tried to find some positives, try to find some new perspectives, try to find a little bit more to make me happy about Syracuse football. And I think I might have it at this point in time. And I've talked about this, and a lot of this is going to be summary of previous episodes that we've hit on in the last month. And one of those key episodes and key points was the coordinators. And right, you lose Tony White, you lose Robert and those were huge departures for Syracuse, as the coordinator carousel has sort of been just riding around in circles at this point. It'll be Syracuse's third OC in the last few years. It'll be Syracuse's, how long was Tony White here? 4 seasons. So, relatively quick, but not terrible in that regard. And I was worried. They weren't upgrading in terms of role. They weren't upgrading to head coaches. It was a linear move. I know there's probably money and family and other things involved, but it wasn't the move that I was sort of okay losing these guys for. But I like what I've seen in terms of Jason Beck and what he is doing, and the relationship it seems like he has with Garrett Schrader at this point in time. I like what I've seen from the godfather of the 3-3-5 in Rocky Long, the founder of the defense. It seems like they both have this strong relationship with players off the field that can switch in an instant to that on-field necessity. Let's elevate, let's get serious, let's get focused. And I like the scheme at this point in time. And I think with Rocky Long, as Dino Babers has advertised, there's going to be that room for a lot more adjustments. And we might see some more intricate changes week by week, situation by situation. And it's sort of like, if you remember back to the glory days of the 2-3 zone with Jim Boeheim, and I know there aren't many fond memories of it in recent years, but if you go back, say to the early 2010s, that isn't even necessarily the glory days in some people's mind, but you go back to the early 2010s where, you had incredible recruiting classes and really strong teams and chance to contend for a national title year after year. You were seeing those halftime adjustments to the zone and those smaller tweaks that you can go in, break things down, and come out a new defensive system that will work within the means that you already know. And I think that is what Dino was advertising in terms of Rocky Long. And I will say this all the time. I wish we could hear from the coordinators, but that's not something that Dino is too keen on. I'd love to hear from Rocky Long a little bit. I'd love to hear from Jason Beck a little bit more than we do, because right now they don't talk at all, right? They're not having press conferences. You're not seeing their input. And I would be really interested to get some of their thoughts and ideas heading into the season. Dino wants to keep things under lock and key. I get it. But it is unfortunate because I'm very interested in a lot of their perspectives. That was one of the big things as I look into this season. And they'll continue to have eyes on them, right? As new coordinators should, right? Just because I like what I've seen so far in preseason camp, in inter squad action, lining up against your own team, doesn't mean that that necessarily translates to on-field success. So there are still big eyes on that situation and questions that need to be answered in terms of what they can do success-wise for Syracuse. But for right now, I am more confident in this team than I thought I would be. And that is in veteran guys continuing to step up, in Schrader doing what he does, in on Rondé Gadsden as a big time player for Syracuse, and not necessarily that outspoken guy, but more so an individual that does what he needs to do and leads by example. Marlo Wax, Caleb Okachukwu, all of these veteran guys in veteran spots are huge for the Orange, and it's something that we continue to or I at least continue to default back to in terms of where my confidence in this team comes from. I like that there are vets in big spots. I like, you got Jason Simmons with senior, status in the secondary. I like that Isaiah Johnson, albeit a transfer last season, comes in as a senior with a lot more starts under his belt than a lot of these guys. And there is experience, and Justin Barron in the mix as well, and things like that. There's a lot of experience in spots that you want experience. I like that for my confidence meter. I really do. Some areas of concern, just to recap, our preseason coverage. The O-line has a lot of new faces. I'm okay with the O-line. I don't think it's going to be a disaster if I were to predict. But right now, when you look at the O-line, you see some spots, and I can even bring the depth chart up from yesterday as well, if we want to take a look at that as well. Right when you're seeing this and you're looking at the O-line, Enrique Cruz was a presumed starter. Chris Bleich was a presumed starter. But you got a new face in John Ray Reed, the JUCO transfer, Joe Moore, another transfer, and David Wallaba, the legacy, but a transfer, right? You've got three guys from the portal starting on your O-line, plus a brand new starter in Enrique Cruz and a veteran in Chris Bleich, right? There is veteran status there, which is big and important. But it is also worth noting and being aware of the fact that these are four guys that did not start for Syracuse last season, and there can be some growing pains that are associated with that. We don't have another ad today, but I do want to go with the full walkthrough of the schedule. I'll go game by game. I will predict my individual game results, get a final roster, or not a final roster, a final record prediction as we wrap up our preseason coverage on your Locked On Syracuse Wednesday episode. Tomorrow, I'm excited to get into some specifics with Colgate, what we're looking for in this individual week, and then obviously Friday with some predictions. But before that, let's give the big prediction. This is a prediction I hate making. I hate making predictions in terms of what this team's record will be this season. That's not my favorite thing to do, but it does give some fuel for you to come at me and see how wrong I am, if I am wrong. Right now, and I'm going to see where we go here. I'm looking at this schedule, and you start, and I mentioned the non-conference slate is relatively easy. I am going to say you win the games against Colgate and Western Michigan handedly. Right? Is anyone coming at me today to say that that's wrong? I would assume not, right? That seems as straightforward of a game as possible. The big first question, I guess, has to do with Purdue. And that's going to be a test of this Syracuse team. And it's a Purdue team that's had some turnover and some changes. And you're looking at sort of what things happen with some big shakeups on offense, for sure. Can they come to Purdue and win that game on the road? I don't know. And I believe my original prediction was that they cannot. And I'm going to stick with that. And this is a game that I'm very much okay with being wrong about. And it's a game that I could watch the first two games of the season for Syracuse and watch a game for Purdue and want to flip that immediately. But right now, I'm going to stick with Purdue. I think it's tough to go and win on the road against a solid Big Ten opponent, even though they're not at their peak by any means right now. And on a Saturday night game, it's not a gimme by any means, and I'll go with the home squad there. But I wouldn't be surprised if my prediction changes as the season continues. I think they win the game against Army pretty handedly. That puts them at 3-1 in the non-conference, heading into their 8 games of ACC play. I think they lose the game to Clemson at home, although I do think they can give Clemson a little bit of a run. If things shake up all right for them. I wouldn't be surprised to see this as, a relatively close game in the Dome. I presume it will be sold out, or at least very close to. So I'll have them at 3-2, heading into a North Carolina game in Chapel Hill, where I do think they can win. And that could be my hot take of the year. I'll say it. Let's have it do it. Let's do it. I predicted that to be an 0-3 stretch. But some news in terms of not getting immediate eligibility makes a difference, and not that losing a receiver is make or break, but UNC could be a little bit overrated in my mind at this point. I do like Drake May. I think he has the ability to allow the Tar Heels to win almost any game this season. But I'm going to say Syracuse can go into Chapel Hill and win in upset fashion there to put them at 4-2. I love Florida State this year. People think they're under or overrated. I might argue they're underrated. That's how high I am on that Florida State Seminoles squad. You're going on the road. I don't see it as a win. I think Syracuse dips to 4-3. And unfortunately, people are going to hate me for saying this. This Virginia Tech game isn't a cakewalk. It is not a cakewalk by any means. And I think that game could be a struggle spot for Syracuse this season. Oh, I'm going back and forth. And I want you to know that this is all I don't have this written down. I am writing this down as I talk, so I have an accurate record. But I'm going to say Virginia Tech wins that game against Syracuse. Hate me? I don't care. Say it. I'm making a prediction, okay? It brings Syracuse at that point to 4-4. I think they beat BC handedly. I think that Pittsburgh game at Yankee Stadium is stupid. I'll say it again. And because of how angry I am about that football game at Yankee Stadium against Pittsburgh, a team that has had your number, why are you going to Yankee Stadium to take away one of your home games? I'm going to mark that down as a loss. Syracuse to 5-5. And then they go into a pretty simple conclusion of the season. Georgia Tech is predicted to finish 12th in the conference. Boston College is predicted to finish 13th in the conference. I already talked about that. Syracuse, I think, beats both of those teams. So now they'll be at 6-5. I already mentioned the Boston College prediction result at that point in time. Syracuse at 6-5, solidifying already a bowl game, heading into the final game of the year against a Wake Forest squad in the Dome. Syracuse and Wake Forest, from things that I saw, were picked relatively neck and neck. Wake Forest was given the nod in terms of the true ACC preseason poll. I think Syracuse finishes the season on a high in the Dome with a win against Wake Forest. I'll go with a 7-5 prediction. I think that's the same record prediction that I gave a few weeks ago, but a different route to getting there, and that'll be the route that I stick with at this point. So they'll go 3-1 in the non-conference. They will lose to Clemson, beat North Carolina on the road in their biggest win of the season, drop to Florida State, drop to Virginia Tech, beat BC, lose to Pitt, and then finish the season beating Georgia Tech and Wake Forest for a 7-5 record. We'll return to that. Let me know your record predictions in the comments on YouTube or over at LO_Syracuse on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call that site at this point in time. That'll do it for your Wednesday episode of Locked On Syracuse. I'm your boy OV saying thank you so much for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today and every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. That's your team. That's Syracuse every day. 2 days, 2 more episodes until we are ready for game day. Syracuse and Colgate on Saturday. I'll be there, ready, having some fun. Hope to see you all there. But until then, I'll see you tomorrow. Be kind. Make somebody smile today. Make the world a better place. Have a good one. Enjoy your day, and I will see you tomorrow.